Let us begin with the last technical session. The theme of the fourth session is India, Central Asia, Energy, Geopolitics, Trade and Economy. The session will be chaired by Ambassador Yogendra Kumar. Ambassador Kumar is the former ambassador of India to Tajikistan. We have three speakers in this session. From Kazakhstan, we have our guest, Mr. Kairat Batyrbayev, Executive Director, Eurasian International Studies Association, Astana, Kazakhstan. We have the first speaker from India, Mr. Ameet Kumar, Director, South and Central Asia, CII, New Delhi. Second speaker from India is Dr. Mahesh Ranjan Debata, Assistant Professor, Center for Eurasian Studies, JNU. May I kindly request to Chair Ambassador Yogendra Kumar to kindly conduct the proceedings.
Thank you, DG ICWA Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, fellow panelists, distinguished members of the audience. I wish to compliment the ICWA to host this important international conference for insight into the dynamics of India-Central Asia relations as we mark 30 years of diplomatic relations. In the preceding sessions, and no doubt in the concluding one, the exploration of the unfolding of the dynamics will be a significant contribution to strengthening our relationship. Optimizing its full potential in all the sessions that we have had so far, and we have now, would help abate the geopolitical fluidity in the region and beyond in our larger benefit, enriching our deep civilizational ties. This needs to be emphasized given the current international tensions complicating the common efforts to meet the looming global and regional challenges beyond the capacity of any one country and affecting all without exception. So the concept paper concerning the session on energy, geopolitics, economy, and trade has very succinctly listed out the outcomes expected from the deliberations of this session. And as chair, it will be my duty to prevent them from digressions, especially as our time is limited. For this reason alone, I am not going into the excellent personal credentials of the members of the panel. Each speaker, including the chair, will have 12 minutes with a Q&A for 15 minutes and the chair summing up for another 5 minutes. At the end of 11 minutes, I will alert the speaker to conclude in its remaining 60 seconds. The objective is not only to be purposive and concrete in the outcome, but also to draw the maximum advantage from the presence of such well-informed participants, both on the dais, well, they were in the dais. So, at the first virtual summit of the leaders of India and the 5 Central Asian countries on 27 January 2022, a decision was taken to significantly upgrade relations bilaterally and multilaterally between the two sides, apart from active cooperation in various multilateral organizations of which they are members. In deciding so, both sides noted that buttressed as they are by the millennia-long civilizational ties, this upgradation is important in the context of the whole spectrum of challenges for security and wider socio-economic progress of our respective regions. They agreed their summit to be a biannual event, but also to have regular meetings of the foreign ministers, ministers of trade and culture, as well as of their respective national security advisors. They also decided that India will host a permanent India Central Asia Center to function as the secretariat for servicing this mechanism. Apart from demonstrating the seriousness of our leaders to strengthen relations between India and Central Asia, the Delhi Declaration listed a range of immediate shared tasks to achieve this objective. The coronavirus pandemic was a reality check, not only for the two sides, but the world as a whole, about the destabilizing ramifications of our institutional unpreparedness for responding to unexpected, let's say, black swan events, with consequences far beyond the confines of national territories, be that healthcare and related infrastructure, high-impact community development projects, utilization of $1 billion line of credit for infrastructure development projects, regional connectivity projects like the International North-South Transport Corridor, other logistics-related complexities, culture and tourism, IT and mass communications, defense and sustainable development goals, or global warming and energy. There is a critical relationship of all of these with the theme of our session on energy, geopolitics, economy, and trade. The leaders recognized, albeit not the first time, that the current level of trade and investment between India and Central Asia is far from realizing its true potential, and called for concerted efforts to boost the existing level of trade and investment in sectors like medicine, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, education, information technology, business process outsourcing, infrastructure, agriculture and agro-processing, energy, space industry, leather and footwear industry, gem and jewelry, etc. and called for development direct contact between the Indian provinces and various Central Asian regions, including partnership arrangements between them. They also asked the respective ministers to prepare a roadmap for trade and industrial cooperation. In this regard, they desired greater effort on the part of the India Central Asia Business Council, which also involved the creation of an investment club under it. That there are structural limitations in terms of the nature of trade and economic relationship between India and Central Asian countries, apart from the lack of direct access, has been widely commented upon. That this is the main reason as to why this relationship dwarfs in comparison to other major economies adjacent to the Central Asian region. Lion's share in this is that of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, with the usual Indian export basket being the same with practically all countries in the region, although the pattern of services trade and investments varies. The gamut of entire economic cooperation also varies from country to country, including credit lines for various infrastructure and other projects. The rapidly evolving geopolitical dynamic in the wake of the coronavirus and the Ukraine conflict has an economic dimension as well, as we would necessarily be conscious of it. At the October 22 C5+1 summit with Russia, President Putin recommended reconfiguration of financial systems, unified energy system, transport corridors, and regional security. In a week's time, the first EU Central Asia summit also took place, and in Astana, with a focus on sustainable transport, logistics and digital connectivity, green development, joint management of water resources, rivers and inter-regional cooperation in water energy partnership. An EU Central Asia Economic Forum platform was set up. Shortly thereafter, there was a C5+1 EU Foreign Ministerial meeting in Samarkand, where inter alia, digital connectivity, transport connectivity, and significantly energy connectivity between Central Asia and the EU were discussed. Although not strictly related to this session, but indicative of the strategic trends, the Herat Security Dialogue representing anti-Taliban groups with the US and UK Special Envoys of Afghanistan participating was convened for the first time in Dushanbe in late November. President Putin at the above-mentioned Astana summit accused US and UK intelligence agencies of mobilizing anti-Taliban groups, resulting in border tensions between Afghanistan and Central Asian countries. All these developments signify that the strategic and economic interests of major powers in the region have grown considerably in recent times. This coincides with the growing desire of all Central Asian countries to diversify their choices for national resilience to cope with the unexpected internal and external shocks. Rising commodity and energy prices, declining remittances, negative impacts of global warming, inadequate infrastructure, including for healthcare, etc., do act as imperatives for the Central Asian leaderships to chart new pathways for the regions and the individual countries' socio-economic progress. This context places the resource richness of the region in a different perspective. In global percentage terms, oil reserves are 2.37%, natural gas 4.28%, coal 4.16%, uranium 17%, while the Caspian Sea holds 35 billion barrels of proven oil and around 11% of the world's gas reserves. The regional hydropower potential is again very high. The OSCE has also noted that the Central Asian renewable energy usage is minimal despite its abundance. An attendant problem is the absence of a region-wide energy grid and localized energy grids. Although the broad directions in our energy-related engagement, trade and investment relationship have been directed by the leaders on both sides, the above scenario may lead to some other tentative approaches. In these respects, so we'll discuss all these issues because as to how the various spheres of potential economic cooperation, investment, and energy cooperation, I think how they make themselves manifest in our discussion. So in these areas, we can upscale our engagements, but also explore the possibilities of leveraging our friendship with the different interested powers. So here I have some points which we can discuss or not discuss, it's up to you. We can explore joint and multilateral collaboration with the EU in the trade, investment, project-related engagements. We can do the same thing with Russia. Indian approach has been to explore currency swap arrangements, although the current trade imbalance makes it impractical with Central Asian countries, but joining with Russia, and that can be explored, too can help in expanding our trade relations. Due to Western sanctions in Russia, there has been higher Central Asian export to the country. This is not confined just to Central Asian countries. I could mention Turkey, for example, and even other countries which are not subject to Western sanctions. We can explore that possibility as we work on our trade. Our high impact local community projects approach is a good one, which can apply to all the areas for bolstering socioeconomic stability and progress. One needs to also investigate, and perhaps we should do it here, their economic viability of further upscaling, because these are smaller projects, but we can upscale them if they become economically viable. We also need to examine as to why the $1 billion LOCs are unutilized. We find the other smaller LOCs actually are being used. Uzbekistan is one example that I can think of. Also, as I mentioned in the previous session, our external media approach is crucial in terms of perception, mutual perception and which also has quite important economic possibilities. As envisaged in the summit declaration, the setting up of the ME administered secretariat needs to be expedited so that it becomes a clearinghouse for ideas for development in the areas that we are going to discuss here. So I will not again list out the objectives for our session. I think everybody knows that. So may I invite with this our first speaker, Mr. Kairat Batyrbayev. After 11 minutes, I'll give you a signal. Okay, thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
I'd like to thank ICDP for ICWA for the opportunity to participate in this important event, and I would like to start our topic from alternative energy supply routes from Kazakhstan to India. Actually, the distance between our countries is not really far. It's only 1.6 thousand kilometers. But and the shortest possible gas pipeline, TAPI, is about 2,000 kilometers. But in our current situation, due to Afghanistan situation and others, this project is currently remains stalled. August 2021, associated with the withdrawal of international coalition troops headed by United States from Afghanistan, which led the Taliban to return their power and made a significant impact on changing geopolitical situation. As you can see on the map, before Americans left and after, the flight routes changed significantly. Despite some positive developments in Afghanistan in terms of changing the operator of Kairat Mazar-e-Sharif railroad, our company started to work in this project, and there is also a statement by permanent representative of to United Nations from Taliban, Shaheen, about Afghanistan open to Indian investment. The overall situation nevertheless remains unstable and insecure. February 2022 marked the beginning of Russian-Ukrainian military conflict, which further changed the geopolitical situation in the world. This led to the introduction of anti-Russian sanctions by Western countries and provoked the world energy and food crisis due to the disruption of traditional supply chains. This made it difficult for other countries, including Kazakhstan, to export oil and gas resources, since a significant volume of its oil export passed through Russia, which is not interested in occupying that free niche of energy resources supplied to Europe by other countries. In this case, there was an attempt by Russia to prevent Kazakh oil export to European Union by stopping the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which has 80% of Kazakhstani oil export to Europe. That's why, in this regards, to prevent such cases, it is important to diversify energy supply routes headed to different countries, whereas South Asia and especially Indian direction is considered promising due to significant demand related to high population density, rapid development of the economy, as well as the ocean, access to the world ocean. There are two main roads existing right now. One of them is the International North-South Transport Corridor, which has been said already. Experts predict that this route will be able to carry up to 25 million tons of cargo per year by 2030, which is 75% of the total volume of containers traffic between Eurasia, South Asia, and Persian Gulf. The development of the eastern branch, as you may know, this north-south corridor has three main routes. One is going through Western Road, go through Azerbaijan, one directly in the through Caspian Sea, and one through Kazakhstan. So the development of the eastern branch of the north-south transport corridor is preferable for our country. Kazakhstan has a sea gateway, the port Aktau, which has 12 berths for various purposes. Regular ferry service with Caspian ports, transport and logistics center, allowing process up to 2 million tons of dry and up to 8 million tons of liquid cargo. This corridor also involved a lot of countries to develop. From Indian part, New Delhi has already invested about 2.1 billion in the project, of which 0.5 billion was spent on the construction of a port in Iranian Chabahar, and 1.6 billion in the reconstruction of the railway line in Zehedan on the Afghan border. From our side, in November 2022, Iran announced its readiness to provide land port in the port of Bandar Abbas for the construction of Kazakh terminal. By the end of 2022, the EU and Iran are planning to sign an agreement on a free trade zone, which should also intensify cooperation, including along this route. But like in other cases, there are some advantages and disadvantages of any project, and one of the most disadvantage of this project is experts know that the main reason why the corridor is of this route has not been put into full operation is related to the insufficient level of development of Iranian transport and logistic networks. This is caused by years of sanctions pressure on Iran. For example, Iran's railroad branches near the ports are single track, non-electrified, and have high gradient, which together significantly limit the capacity of Iranian's transport infrastructure, making the road through it very long. Mostly the whole road, it takes 25 days to reach from St. Petersburg to India, but the half of the way, almost 12 days in Iran. And the second route, from the realistic point of view, which can not be affected by Afghanistan situation and others, is route through China, Myanmar. In 2013, China implemented its Belt and Road Initiative. Xi Jinping came to Kazakhstan and he announced it in Nazarbayev University. It established supply chains, channels for goods and services by pipeline, railroads, and sea. It should be noted that during his visit to Delhi in May 2013, Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang announced that the idea of creating China, Bangladesh, India, Myanmar economic corridor, which is transferred into maritime Silk Road. Currently, China is continuing to construct the construction of the second Eurasian transcontinental bridge, which will connect railways and roads. The highway will pass through China and then through Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, Iran, and will reach to Europe. Most of the logistics systems are already functioning well, and they don't require additional investment, and theoretically can allow Kazakhstan to expand the geography of energy supplies to India as well. I mean, in vice versa direction from now. Through this road has two possible ways to deliver goods via pipelines and via railroads. The one is here We can see a very developed map of pipeline system in India and in China. Due to some difficulties related to highness of Himalayas, a lot of mountains, and there is no possibility to make roads, but there is a developed system in the eastern part of China and India also. So these existing systems can link Chinese province of Yunnan via Manipur to via Myanmar to Manipur province state. And due to railways, India has its own powerful railway infrastructure for which development of annually acquires new imported trains and modernizes its management system. For example, India's Ministry of Urban Development is now actively promoting the development of automatic train guidance system as a part of the government's Make in India initiative. In the future, automatization process will be applied through the country, which also will allow integration with railway projects of other countries and accelerate the supply of energy resources from Kazakhstan, in case if we connect this with Chinese railroads. There are also some disadvantages of this project. The huge disadvantage is the relations between India and China, and they're related to border issues, some other things like Dalai Lama's support, such as boycott of Beijing Olympics, India's participation in NATO analog of APR project Quad, and the factor of Pakistan also affects. However, Indian politicians are well aware that, unlike the Americans, China does not pursue an aggressive foreign policy through threats and interference in domestic affairs. There are also an issue about track gag. Three countries, Kazakhstan, China, and India, we have, all of us, we have different track gags. The one in China is the shortest one. The Indian is the widest, so there is some quite of problems also. But nevertheless, China and India both have many similar characteristics. According to theoreticians, both countries are, it's obvious that two countries are oldest civilizations, the largest developing countries, the most populous nations, and they also have a nuclear weapon. In addition, according to some theories of international relations, they belong to the same category of countries. According to criteria of Wallerstein world system analysis, both countries belong to the category of semi-periphery. Fukuyama classifies China and India as a less successful communities compared to the West, but where business is conducted by families and state, and the association of the middle level are not developed. Keohane classifies China and India as large and previously poor countries that currently experiencing rapid economic development, which will inevitably increase their political power. The prospects for Kazakhstan and India cooperation are mainly related to energy supplies from Kazakhstan. And generally, there are many areas for cooperation between India and Kazakhstan. India's advantage is pharmaceutical, information technologies, auto parts, spices, and agricultural products. Kazakhstan's capabilities in petrochemical and nuclear energy are also well known. In terms of development of energy cooperation between Kazakhstan and Delhi, there are broad prospects for cooperation in the supply of Kazakhstani uranium. This is due to changing conditions in the market and the plans of the world to transition. So, hydrogen neutral theory that all United Nations countries are willing to reach also includes this development of nuclear power and some Indian plans to develop nuclear factories also are involved. So it's like a win-win situation for both countries. And the recent example, a few days ago, one of the India's most richest person, Gautam Adani, he came to Kazakhstan. He met with our president, our prime minister, and they decided to interfere in the part of developing transport routes and logistic systems. And our president said that our main priority in case of logistics is developing Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, which, as I mentioned, has from both sides can be connected with India. So that's the end. Thank you. Dhanawad.
Thank you. Just a very quick clarification. You mentioned these routes that you mentioned are basically for goods or for fuel, gas and oil, for both? Because the tracks can bear these wagons carrying LNG and oil, whether these tracks, the Iranian track, can they bear that weight?
I think they're planning. I think all involved parts are planning to involve.
So they'll have to be upgraded in a way, no?
They're working on it.
They're working on it.
Yes.
But what about the Trans-Caspian Sea supply route via Azerbaijan or via Turkey?
Yes.
Is that possible?
Of course. I think we can connect it.
The other thing I just want to ask you, because we're talking on this, you know, at one time there was a swap. Kazakhstan gave oil to Iran and Iranian oil came to India.
Yes.
So instead of the Kazakh oil being received by Iran, can the same route be used by the oil, Kazakh oil, to come to India? Is that possible?
Yes,
can be explored?
yes.
That's possible.
Yes.
Thank you. So now I invite Mr. Ameet Kumar from CII to make his presentation. Again, 12 minutes. After 11 minutes, I give you a hand signal.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank DG ICWA for inviting me to be part of today's engagement in presence of such, distinguished, speakers. We have just, came out of the pandemic, and lot of, people have faced hardship, and we have, realized from the business perspective that, things should move on. So the businesses have also evolved, and they are looking for, newer markets to expand their, operations. So in this context, as Ambassador Sajanhar, in the previous session talked about, that Central Asian region have been age-old friends and partners, bound by caravan which traveled between our countries for centuries. It is pertinent to underline that the centuries-old relationship between India and Central Asian republics have evolved through cultural interaction. But in the 21st century, importance of Central Asia region is just not merely civilizational and historical, but also geopolitical and economic. It holds a great strategic importance to India. The Central Asian Summit, which was organized on 27th of January earlier this year, reflects the importance India attaches to this region, and which is also part of our extended neighborhood. Developing a good and strong investment relationship with this region is foremost priority for us, not just for political and strategic reason, but also on the economic front, like energy. We talked about energy security, the huge market. It's a gateway to not only CIS but also European countries, and overall India's security concern in its north-western border. So it's a very important relationship for India. Many of the speakers talked about the impediments, how we have not been able to harness the full potential, and one of the biggest reason is connectivity. We are aware of it, and number of eminent speakers before me have flagged this issue, but there is no denying that our economy stands to immeasurably gain if we are able to address the issue of connectivity between our nations. This would allow us to realize a vision of promoting an extended neighborhood and strengthen the bond of trust, mutual respect, economic opportunity that has bonded us together from time immemorial. We talked about INSTC. It's indeed an effective effective step in the right direction. You talked about Chabahar. Here I would like to mention that from CI's perspective, we have been proactively working on promoting Chabahar towards to Indian businesses, and how we can leverage Chabahar to access the Central Asian market. One of the biggest reason which we felt that companies who have a major exposure with US market, they are a bit skeptical of using the Chabahar route or in any Iranian ports. So it becomes very difficult or unviable for reaching to Central Asian market. So we need to find ways how we can bridge this gap. And you talked about new projects. Certainly there is a movement, but these are all long, connectivity is a long gestation project. It takes time. And one solution could be we do high value, low volume commodities like pharmaceutical products, coffee, tea, frozen meats via air corridor to avoid the difficulties of moving goods through raid and roll for the time being. And eventually we parallelly work on the connectivity, hard connectivity issue to actually anyway the land connectivity is always most profitable way, but for the time being we can focus on that. It is necessary to increase the frequency of flights. In the morning session I have heard that only four countries have been connected, but we need to increase the flight connectivity not just between the capital but also other major cities. While talking to the airline companies and our members, we realized that the financial viability is the biggest challenge for air connectivity. So one of the option which from CII which we have proposed in our various governmental meeting is like we can propose hopping kind of a connection between Central Asian countries, air connectivity, hopping connection. For example, a hopping connection from Dushanbe to Moscow, which is already there, or through any European country. So this somewhere we would able to mitigate the cost factor and increase the passenger load. Ambassador Kumar, mentioned about $1 billion USD line of credit given by Government of India towards high impact community development projects in Central Asia. We feel that greater.
Not 1 billion overall.
Yeah.
But these are separate.
Outlay. Yeah. So a great, but what we felt that greater emphasis by government on credit lines would help Indian companies to assure it would assure returns and could excite further them to invest into private sector projects in Central Asia region. We talked about information gap. Yes, it is there, which actually it's a big impediment. And from CIS perspective, we are constantly engaging with our counterparts in bridging that. At least on the economic front, we are able to exchange in business information. And the previous speaker in the previous session, we heard about business inside the business mind. So we could have similar kind of a books for Central Asian, that would help us to understand more about the Central Asian Republic on that perspective. Before I conclude, I would like to make few specific suggestions. One, I already talked about augmenting air connectivity and increasing the flights between India and Central Asia region. increasing the credit lines, and how we can incentivize Indian companies to go and invest in Central Asian region. We need to also look at how we can diversify the export basket. We can look at a detailed study where we can find out the exact potential product wise, HS code wise, so that we can, and also match it with the logistic cost. So it will give a holistic picture of the business environment and the potential. Fourth, India specializes in trade in services and is an emerging market. Central Asia has a huge demand for high-tech services in several spheres like healthcare, higher education, IT, ITES, consultancy, engineering, construction, training and skill development. Efforts needs to be made to match these complementarities. One of the important aspect which I felt like, in the previous session, we talked about education as a part of, culture. So how we can leverage that part, and education can, it's commercial also. Yeah, and it's commercial also. So private universities like Amity and Sharda, they have already, opened campus in Uzbekistan. So we need to see similar more success stories, not just in one, country, but across Central Asian region. And fifth is to realize the full potential in trade and business, and it is essential to bridge the information gap. For this, from CI's perspective, we have been exchanging, business delegation on a regular basis. Few months back, we hosted a delegation led by the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Uzbekistan, and we organized a business meeting. A high-level business delegation also came, and we facilitated business-to-business meetings. So going forward, we would like to continue this engagement with our partners in Central Asia, and we are planning to do a major India Central Asia Business Summit, which will bring in all the relevant stakeholders at one platform. And we can not just deliberate the policy issues and the impediments, but also it will give an opportunity for businesses to create more transactional linkages. And if you bring two businessmen together, they will find ways to do business. So we don't have to teach them which route or what route to take. They'll know how to manage. If there is a financial viability, they will definitely go ahead and do it. So with these words, I thank you all for hearing me out, and thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. That was pretty quick. So we have some more time. I just want to ask one question. Earlier FICCI was the nodal sort of agency for India Central Asia business relations. Now it's CII?
Both chambers are working in tandem. We both have our own strengths.
I get the point. Thank you. I get the point. My second point is this. My second point is this. You mentioned about air connectivity. You see, it's a question of fifth freedom rights. Yes. So if you are flying from here, operating and picking up passengers in Almaty or Tashkent or wherever, the destination, that airline which you have in cooperation, they don't accept that. What the Central Asian airlines are doing actually are they're picking up passengers here in a bilateral flight, then they receive them there in Tashkent, and then or wherever, and then from there they fly to other destinations. So in fact, my own experience once was slightly inferior quality Uzbek airplane to Delhi, but the plane from Tashkent to New York was top of the line. Yeah. So this is how these kind of things actually get done. So I think then we'll talk about it later. But now, may I request Professor Mahesh Ranjan Debata to make his presentation. So again, you have 12 minutes. After 11 minutes, you get a hand signal. Thank you.
Sir. And let me at the outset extend my heartfelt thanks to DG ma'am and ICWA team for such a wonderful assemblage of scholars, intellectuals, practitioners. And as far as my presentation is concerned, it is divided into 6 parts. A is energy and geopolitics. B is Central Asia as an arena of geopolitical power play. C is describing the energy profile of Central Asia in brief. Everybody knows here, I will not give any new information. And the fourth is geopolitics over Central Asian energy resources. That includes the energy interests of major powers and the regional powers. And the fifth is the where does India stand in this game. And the last but not least is the conclusions and the recommendations. As it is a well-known fact that distribution of energy resources are not even in the world ever. And this uneven distribution of energy resources is credited for the geopolitical attributes to energy issues. Since oil economy has a global nature, energy security of nations is related to the geopolitics of the region and the world at large. And it is important to highlight some sequence of world events, and particularly the geopolitical character of energy resources that first became evident during the World War II, and that the example where the Germans ran out of fuels, and in 1970s the oil embargo made energy as the most important element of geopolitics. And now the geopolitics of space, that means the occupation and the expansion of territories, is replaced by the geopolitics of natural resources. Control over natural resources, especially energy resources, is the key at the present juncture. When you talk about energy security, as rightly pointed out by a few delegates this morning, that food security was initiated as an important, a key driver of international relations, which has been replaced by energy security. And energy geopolitics has become the order of the day. And energy-rich hydrocarbon, particularly, regions are the focal point, and Central Asia is one such region. Central Asia has become an arena of geopolitical power play in the post-Soviet period, and that clearly reveals or reflects the heartland theory of Mackinder, the imperial rivalry of the 19th century great game, and again the 20th century great game, to some extent the 21st century, as doubted by some of the scholars, analysts, and strategists in the modern time, modern and contemporary times, is related to this. Then why, the question arises, why a new great game in Central Asia? There are three important issues: geoeconomics, geostrategy, and geopolitical importance. Even some people are talking about the geocultural space in Central Asia. And when you talk about energy geopolitics in Central Asia, the question again arises, how rich is Central Asian energy landscape to be a conduit for energy geopolitics? As has been mentioned by some of the scholars, that hydropower in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, and nuclear power in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Some analysts also talk about there are some uranium found in Tajikistan as well, and fossil fuels in Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan as well. These have made Central Asia the geopolitical focal point. So what are the energy interests of the major powers? I will mention three powers here: Russia, China, and the West. And Russia's interest is strategic, and of course geopolitical considerations were there. There is a dominant control on energy policy of CS and energy routes was also one of the Russian interest. And last but not the least, how to prevent the Western influence on Central Asian energy landscape. When you look at China, it's of course geoeconomics and affordable, cheap energy resources from Central Asia. It has been successful in taking three pipelines, one from Kazakhstan, one another from Turkmenistan, and also planning to have one more from Uzbekistan. And then the energy security imperatives and Central Asian republics as alternative energy destinations. And the West, particularly US and EU, they talk about geoeconomic, particularly Europe's energy security and geopolitics, US policy of training its guns towards Russia and China. And what are the energy interests of regional powers that is important in this context? I will mention Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan. Iran interests are critical for southern route of Central Asian energy exports. Then Turkey is critical for western route of Central Asian republics energy exports. And Pakistan intends to utilize its geostrategic location. 2, it has energy security consideration as well. So then what the Central Asian republics want? Number 1, independence of their energy policies. 2, diversification of export routes and destinations. 3, better price of their energy produce. And 4, foreign technological, advanced technological and financial investment. And 5th, diversification of their economies. Then where India stands in the game and why shares in India's mind? Number 1 is India's energy security, to secure energy security, because India is number 3 energy consuming country right now. There is another important issue is import diversification. We have been dependent on the Persian Gulf, the West Asia region. Now this is another opportunity to diversify our energy import. Then affordability, then geopolitical and strategic considerations, already been discussed by many scholars this morning and afternoon as well. And last is reducing reliance on the OPEC, the oil producing and exporting countries, due to cartel politics. So the question arises again, is energy between India and the Central Asian Republic sustainable? I argue, yes, there is convergence of mutual geo-economic strategic interest as highlighted by one of the delegates this morning. So what are the hindrances then? India, Central Asia, full energy cooperation potential realization is hindered by number 1 is geopolitics, geoeconomics, security issues and structural obstacles are there. It's all been described by my previous speaker. Then what are the geopolitics positives for India? The rapid Chinese footprints in Central Asia energy landscape has made Russia insecure. So it favors Indian presence here. Russian cooperation is instrumental in India's energy security, energy footprint in the region. India is a major energy consumer as already been discussed, and it could be a reliable market for Central Asian republics and Russian energy produce as well, more so after the Russia-Ukraine war. And for the West, India is critical for containing China in the region. Sanctions hit Iran, as someone in the morning talked about, wants Indian investment as well. India has already invested in Chabahar port and the Zahedan railway line, as it was given by my previous speaker. For Central Asian region, India is a long-term, reliable and alternative market. India's entry to Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Ashgabat Agreement are two instances that could be geopolitically positive for India. But what are the negatives then? Opportunism-driven energy diplomacy benefited from persisting Russia-West animosity, and a weakened Russia battered by the Western sanctions in the recent times. Then of course there is the China factor. China's deft maneuvering in Iran, that includes your 25-year China-Iran agreement. Then transportation bottlenecks, as rightly pointed out by previous speakers. No direct land boundary is the number 1 bottleneck. And the fragility of the Central Asian republics, non-traditional security threats that includes terrorism, drug trafficking, Islamic fundamentalism. And the geopolitical environment, Russia-Ukraine war, Western sanctions on Iran and Russia also are some of the couple of negatives that is going to hinder India's access to this region. And last but not the least is the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war effect on transportation infrastructure like INSTC and the Chabahar port. Then the conclusion is that there is a need for major interventions, a robust energy diplomacy. Our diplomacy in the region, as rightly pointed out by Meena Singh Roy ma'am, that it has been since the last one decade about the Connect Central Asia policy, and then the Act North policy after Prime Minister Modi visited at one go all the 5 Central Asian countries at one go, and then the necessity of lobbying for the Indian companies. And it has started, as rightly pointed out by Kairat sir, about Adani's visit to Kazakhstan. Then granting loans and other economic aids to create favorable environment. I will again reiterate what Ambassador Yogendra Kumar said about the credit, the implementation of the credit, line of credit, and cooperation with the like-minded partners like EU, Russia, and Japan, and India's access to Eurasian Economic Union and the Asian Energy Strategy as proposed by Kazakhstan. And lastly, focus on sprucing up transport infrastructure like INC and Chabahar. Chabahar has been a port of promise, was a port of promise because of the geopolitical situation following the situation in Afghanistan. But it could be, there should be optimism that it could be like a port of promise again, and it could also help India getting the access to the region. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. I think you covered it very well, very succinctly. Before I throw it open it for the Q&A, may I request Mr. Rohit Sharma to maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes just to about your own experience as to how, all these issues, what you'd like to say.
Sir, I'll just add on to what my colleague Ameet has just mentioned about Central Asia. Let's just a very small negative is that the banking system remains a challenge for Indian companies. But the best part is now Turkmenistan has started the LC, allow the LC for the international trade. Yeah, so letter of credit. Uzbekistan still has to do it, but otherwise there are a lot of those policies which are emerging right now on ground. The best part is the Central Asian companies have started making use of Jawaharlal and Fujairah. Like what the friend from Kazakhstan has just mentioned about. Fujairah, UAE. So what they are doing is they are parking their oil in those depots there in Fujairah, so that they can quickly just transport the energy lines to India as and when there is a requirement.
So how is it transported from
they take time, so via, even for that matter, I'll just come to that point also, what is being done right now. So they are making use of even Bandar Abbas and Chabahar. So what they're doing is,
how is it transported to Central Asia through?
via, they come through Bandar Abbas also.
No, but how do they come to
it's through a train. It's a rail network. Yes.
It's just a wagon.
Yes. I'll just raise this point. I'm sorry. So what they're doing is like they really have to promote it now to the Indian companies that this option is open for them to just quickly just start sending their cargo, because it's the bread and butter of our bilateral trade. Yeah. They really have to focus on the bilateral trade. This is eventually the simplest of the things and the most difficult one. So likewise, make use of that these possibilities. Second is they really have to just talk about that as and when there is a this important fora like ICWA organized seminar. INSTC we had talked about earlier what Kazakhstan was doing, like those companies, they were making use of Gongzu. So via Gongzu, a very circuitous route had to be undertaken, 45-50 days for Indian cargo to reach Kazakhstan. But now they have realized that via Bandar Abbas, it is 10 to 15 days time. Just 2,000, 3,000 kilometers quickly you take your stuff there. So now again the American banks, that's the problem, because they will not let your LC open up, because if it is straight Bandar Abbas, so then the role of Indian logistic companies can kick in. There is a option of switch BL. You show your cargo is going to Jawaharlal or for that matter anything in UAE, and then the BL is switched on. So then from there onwards they are not interested whether it is going via Bandar Abbas or Chabahar. So you quickly take your stuff out and it goes in 15 days time, it is there in Kazakhstan. Instead of 40-50 days, now this is the new route and the new system they are implementing. Very effective and result oriented. So these are the new positives that we really need to just focus on. Yes, we have talked about a lot of impediments. Impediments will always be there because landlocked nature of all the Central Asian economies. But at the same time, what Indian companies and the Central Asian companies have realized that they cannot be just sitting idle and just waiting for something big to come their way through the policy makers of the government's intervention. So these are the new, those seeds which are emerging and which are very important for Indian companies or for that matter Central Asian companies to just derive benefit from. So just 3 minutes, I'm done.
Thank you. I think as now we open it for discussion, maybe from our friends in Central Asia as well as from India, give ideas as to why our $1 billion credit line has not yet been utilized. What are the difficulties in using it? So that could be one point, but of course, it's open for discussion now. Thank you. And I just wanted to mention that please introduce yourself very quickly and pointed question or comment. Thank you.
Myself, Dr. Puneet, Research Fellow at the ICWA. I would like to ask Rohit sir about what kind of experience we had with Kazakhstan, with PNB and Tengri Bank. And that is also, we should take the consideration when we are also...
The banking, when it comes to LC or preparation of LC, and our banks are very efficient, Indian banks. You name any bank, so the mismatch happens. So generally, if there is some understanding happening between the importer or exporter importer, they go in for TTs, The bypass or advance payments are being made. Just because LC still, the banking system, though it is very robust in Kazakhstan, it's still, come on? This wire transfer, they call it, yeah. So they just go in for that instead of just waiting for that mismatch happening, and a lot of those documentation and the paperwork is still being done in different language, Russian language.
They are giving this kind of picture that it is just not follow the norms. PNB is not follow
there have been licensing. There are some those forms have to be filled up in Russian or the local language. So, but generally, then eventually the Kazakh companies, or for that matter, the Central companies, are finding a way out. Then quickly, beforehand, when the cargo leaves Indian shores, it has all the paperwork is being done in this local language, so that there is no stopping happening.
Thank you, sir. My second question is for Mr. Kairat. If you can put on light the recent event in Temirtau. There was some clashes in Temirtau. Temirtau. So I just want to ask this question in the context of the Adani visit. What was there in the clashes? It was just a local nature, or if you can put on light?
How did it link with Adani visit?
Because it has effect, it will have some effect if there is some kind of, because Lakshmi Mittal is having this whole city over there and steals investment in the state.
Oh, thank you. I didn't hear about clashes in Temirtau, but some accidents happened in the mines. People died there, miners. And it's not the first case. It's like more than 20 cases during the whole period. So now people are tending to solve their problems, because we announced new Kazakhstan, new reforms, new changes from old Kazakhstan's traditions. That's why we're trying to solve all problems that before we couldn't even talk about. So it was like kind of taboo to talk about them. But now people are trying to solve, and they want better conditions, better work conditions for miners, and that's the issue in Temirtau.
Again, Mr. Rohit Sharma. I'm not talking about Kazakhstan not, but in other Central Asian countries, including Kazakhstan. Do you face any problem in repatriation of profits? Are there any limitations? You have to buy things here instead of taking the money out? Any such impediments you know of?
For Indian companies?
Yes.
I will, more or less, I've been engaged with all these companies who have been doing export-import. But in terms of the investments, generally there's no issues or those concerns being raised. Yeah, the profits being made in those countries. I don't think we are still not that big, but at the same time, we have not come across anything very specific in terms of the repatriation of the profits from Central Asian economies back home. So that is not an issue. As long as you have a robust banking system, it is happening there.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. I want to comment something within the last report about the energy geopolitics and in the Central Asia. Unfortunately, nobody was going to tell about the CASA 1000 because of because of big potential of some Central Asians, namely Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Namely, Tajikistan hydropower capacity, for example, is 527 billion hours, but by this rate, Tajikistan took the 8th place in the world, but the 2nd place in post-Soviet spaces. And when we make cooperation, we must know that our cooperation must, for example, correspond to the international norms. Today, in all of the world, in the era of climate change, in the level of United Nations, we always talk about the sustainable development and development of or strengthening of cooperation within, for example, green economy must be the main part of our cooperation. As I have seen in your society, today in my country, we are moving from the diesel cars to the electronic cars. It is very...
I get your point. I just, on Kasa 1000 that you mentioned, the issue, of course, is that how do you give the energy grid to cover Afghanistan, Pakistan, India? Because that is the idea, that's the conception, ADB. But this is not happening for obvious reasons.
Yeah, but we are not going to live 10 or, for example, 20 or 50, for example, years in upcoming period. We are going to live, yes, our countries, yes. It will be some of the perspective side. Thank you so much.
To just add on the CASA, project, many of your Indian companies like L&T and Sterling Wilson, they have joined and done projects in CASA 1000 projects.
So internal there. Yeah. Please, madam. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Dr. Laura Yerokesha from Kazakhstan. My question is to Dr. Rohit Sharma. Thank you very much. Question is about are there some ideas or do you have some discussions about the terms of payment between India and Central Asia in following the situation in Ukraine, and perhaps the proposals to make payment in rubles or refuse from US dollar as a payment mode, something like this, or it is just
no, generally because this is a policy matter, so we generally get engaged with the industry, all those companies who have been doing business. So, but they generally, as of now, they are preferring a US dollar because of obvious reasons that why it is, if it is happening through the US bank, or if there's a US bank in India, Citibank for that matter. So generally, as of now, it is the dollar terms, LC in dollar terms. Yes, Swift code. So that's it. But we are quite optimistic that a lot of good things will emerge, as and when the Kazakh companies or Central Asian companies, they understand that this is doable, and now they are beginning to understand that not only it is doable, but it is actually implementable in terms of the rail network taking this the cargo, the stuff to India via say Bandar Abbas, and then they just move out in 7 days time. The stuff is the goods are there in on Indian ports. So likewise, it's an ongoing process for that. Yeah.
Yes, but just one. The lady here, yeah.
Hi, Bhavna Dave from SOAS University of London. My question maybe to Mr. Rohit Sharma or whoever else, also others who can answer. In terms of Indian businesses, there are very different types of people connected with government, small scale, private businesses. Then there are also Indian companies based in Dubai and other places who are doing businesses in Central Asia and investments. And I'm not quite clear about the relationship between them and India and also the government and also their responsibilities. So like, for example, the Lakshmi Mittal, who is perceived as Indian, but for financial or purposes is a UK citizen. And you mentioned the accidents which happened in Tamil Nadu. In the construction in Astana, in the Abu Dhabi Plaza, in which lots of Indian, the Dubai-based Indian companies were involved, and there were accidents and everything was kind of hushed aside. People, the local workers are trying to appeal to the Indian government and embassy and elsewhere. They didn't know where to go to. So if you can just talk about these connections, and there are also other Indians based elsewhere in Europe who are operating, and some of them are NRI, OCI. So
this is about the protection of labor, or it's about
protection of labor,
tax evasion, or it's about what?
Everything. No. I mean, when I talk about the workers who were brought in from Dubai,
and it has a bearing on trade, investment. Sorry, please. Yeah.
So these were the workers who were brought in by the Dubai-based companies, Indians, maybe Pakistanis, who worked there, and the term they were underpaid or not paid. Some of them were died and anyway, were not paid compensation. So a lot of these things are happening, but they're not reported anywhere in the mainstream media. And they're kind of...
Central Asia, you heard about any of these things?
Sorry?
You heard any such incidents in Central Asia?
In Astana, I'm talking about the Abu Dhabi Plaza in
oh, I see. Okay,
Astana,
okay. Right,
and also the Tamirtau, in the Lakshmi Damitr plant and elsewhere. So these things happen with Chinese businesses and now Chinese companies, and similar things have been reported about Indian-operated companies.
Response, please. Maybe you can respond.
I'll just quickly give the industry perspective why it was being done through Dubai. Because during the pandemic, Indian companies, there was no direct connectivity. One, second, once they just had to flow into Uzbekistan for that matter, any specific project execution, they had to just quarantine themselves for 15 days here and then 15 days there. But anybody who was flying through Dubai, it was a direct flight straight into Uzbekistan. So they didn't have to waste any time or resources on that. So a lot of those companies who could actually manage, or they had some operational bases in Dubai, they applied for their visas for Uzbekistan through Dubai. Right. So just to make their life easy. So, but otherwise, in terms of the labor laws, I'm sorry, we actually do not have any mandate to just talk about that. But this is just to circumvent the entire system of delays. Right. So that was something very specific, and we did raise it eventually that this was being done, right. And it was detrimental to the interests of the Indian companies. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Doctor.
I'm Athar Zafar, Senior Research Fellow at the Council. Thank you all the panel members for their presentation. It's a very small question. Maybe Mr. Ameet or Mr. Rohit can respond. The Central Asian countries have acceded to the TIR convention, and they have also implemented, I think, the TIR convention. Yes, India has also acceded to it. But what is the status? Have we actually implemented it, or just the status of it?
Yeah, INSTC, they said that just to make it more effective, TIR is going to be the name of the game. So that's how Ministry of Commerce is working it out, and because it is much better than ATA carnets, you can actually sell it, your product. So they said that this incongruity in terms of the duties across the geographies and borders, TIR convention is going to be the game changer for them. So it is a gradual thing that more or less, as and when the ministers are meeting and there is a discussion about effectively implementing INSTC. So they are majorly focusing on TIR, and that will be the thing to operationalize the entire this corridor. Once it is, operational, more or less it is gradually taking steam. That's why we have these kind of news happening, that a lot of those companies are taking their stuff, their goods and those products deep into Central Asia through the rail network which has been created. So like this Bandar Anzali, they take it by this rail network, then from there to Astana to Russia, but at the same time to to Azerbaijan also. So.
With JNU. My question is for Amit and Mr. Rohit. Amit, very eloquently, because they made some points. So my question is related to that. It's more of a query actually. He said, he very easily, very smoothly he mentioned that, we offer platforms for business community in Central Asia and India. So, till few years back, doing business in Central Asia was not as easy as we think it here in India. Because rules and regulation, line of credit, banking system, everything is so different. even the people to people whom you need to get into touch with to do business is different. So how are you managing that it has become so fluid? And the other question is that of late, I think just 5-6 months back, ICAF had organized a international conference on logistics. And in that, people who are working in the logistics field, they pointed out that Bandar Abbas is overcrowded at this point of time. So how you only talk about Bandar Abbas? The challenge for them was that Indian community, because Bandar Abbas, India has more share in it. So why aren't the Indian community kind of making awareness regarding it, or they are promoting Chabahar more than Bandar Abbas? So because you guys are doing so much groundwork for doing business, what do you think? Why aren't you promoting Chabahar more than Bandar Abbas? Because Bandar Abbas is, as it is, very crowded, and if you do it through Chabahar or promote Chabahar, it will be more economical in terms of financial and credit line of credit.
You would like to come on the Chabahar part? Okay. Okay.
Foundation. Servant, writing a book for ICWA on India Central Asia. Following on what Kamla said, no need for this. There is, the question is that there are no shipping lines, direct shipping lines between India and Chabahar. And is there a reason for it in terms of the sanctions, or is it just, from both the Iranian side and the Indian side, there is this awareness that no direct shipping lines are there. So, for example, the cargo goes to Jebel Ali, like you said, and then it goes, smaller ships take it to Chabahar, and then they get unloaded. So, is this for technical reasons, or is there a sanction aspect to it?
The Container Corporation of India and the Freight Forwarders Association of India, they actually are, in tandem what exactly needs to be done for promoting Chabahar. But possibly it is the inertia and the operational logistics still are not so effective at Chabahar. The way they, even though Bandar Abbas is overcrowded, yes, that's absolute, issues being faced by a lot of exporters and importers in India. But Chabahar still, they are a bit skeptical in terms of still those, P's and Q's are still not, put in place, and there has been a slowdown happening at the Iranian side also. So, but yeah, both sides, both sides. So, but yes, ground logistics is with the Indian company there in Chabahar. So, but yes, there has been inertia, and there is a major push happening from both Container Corporation of India as well as Freight Forwarders Association of India.
So let's talk about our side. Why is our side not putting its foot on full throttle?
Whatever, it seems that whatever comes faster to them, they cannot waste time. So Bandar Abbas is still happening faster than Chabahar.
Why are we putting full throttle on Chabahar?
The connectivity from Chabahar to the rest of the Central Asian countries, it still is a problem. And Meena, she's an expert on Chabahar, and she has traveled extensively with us to Iran. And it's to Zanedan it is there, but to take, then there's a transshipment. So there's also issue of passing it through Afghanistan, which is again one part Zanedan Zahedan border. Yeah. There's a Zaran's pass. You can take a left turn, and right turn you can go to Afghanistan. But still, but still the most of the transshipment which is happening is through lorries, and it's still it's not very it's not completely happening through it's not a seamless connection, and people are finding it difficult for Veena, you'd like to add on that part?
You see, the
Thing is, there are many issues on this particular route, but it is operational. Now the question is why there is
railway link also.
Sorry.
Operational railway link also, is it?
No, there are certain missing links. I mean, if one will have to put up the map, you know, and then say the certain link is missing, which the Iranians have said they would be constructing. And that is where, you know, once that is done, then probably. Now, the point here is, I think the debate is why there is not a push on Chabahar. There is a lot of push on Chabahar, but there are some issues at the Iranian side. The other issues are at our side. So I think there are bureaucratic hurdles also, which are, you know, reason for it. And, you know, I mean, I don't know if there is a appropriate answer as to why there is a slow movement on it. And it is related also to the perception generally. So there is lack of information. What I feel when I'm suggesting that there has to be a proper study, which was done only by the Freight Forwarders Association in the beginning, and that is the report, you know, which provides you with the linkages. So something like that needs to be done, and that's why I feel, you know, a commission study, maybe any of the think tanks can do it, which actually pinpoints the areas where we are missing on those. And also equally important would be to bring in, you know, the containers, you know, the practically people who are going to use it. Shankar Shinde and Suhail Kazani both are, you know, important players in that sense, and I think any sort of discussion on these people have to be brought in. And the other important point is, you know, we need to, you know, bring Central Asians, we need to bring Central Asians into this debate. And I think now from the Uzbek side, there's a lot of interest, and I do feel that some kind of a short report or a study is something which will, you know, clarify all these doubts that today we are discussing about. I don't know if time permits. I have just one question to our Central Asian friends. Just a very quick. Now, this is about the growing linkages between Central Asia and West Asia. We see, you know, the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Oman and other countries, you know, having. Now, how do you think this can help build the energy cooperation? Do you see any future in that? That's what my question is.
Yes, thank you. First of all, Western Asia and Central Asia, we have common religion, yes, like Muslims, and we have common views on energy policy, not to let energy crisis to develop. So I think, yes, we could have cooperate with them, but the issue of oil export is like business, nothing personal. So I don't think that they can take our into account our recommendations and things like that. So maybe just like cooperation, not the intensive one, but the probable. Yes.
Thank you. You want? Please.
Thank you so much. About making cooperation with Western Asia and Central Asia. Really, this question is very placely, namely for India and China. Why? Because, as we know, 60% of, for example, import of energy in India is from Middle East countries. But also somewhere I also read that also 18% of India's, for example, import of energy also depend to the East, for example, Middle East countries. But the problem is that the spheres, for example, energy providing, which we can cooperate with these countries. For example, in my country, we have good relationship with Russia and with Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan and other countries. But in other spheres, but not maybe not energy spheres, we have close relation with these countries. For example, attraction of investment and other, for example, spheres. Thank you so much.
I just need to also remember that Saudi Arabia recently signed a deal with China to pay for oil and gas in yuan. So Saudi Arabia also turning closer towards Russia, towards its stand as far as all other things are concerned, and especially with oil and gas. So you may conclude that, for example, Kazakhstan being sandwiched between both players, also somehow has to manage to do this. So, and by the way, the links with Saudi Arabia, as far as Kazakhstan is concerned, are becoming more growing and steady now. Not only in terms of, like you mentioned, in religious, we have a but as far as investment is concerned. So this is how the new situation evolves following the situation in Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Maybe I can wind up this session by making.
Just a
sorry,
small
please.
point on Chabahar. You talked about the efforts which from the CIA perspective. I can tell you that in 2019 we took a 40-member delegation specifically to Chabahar to promote Chabahar as a an alternative to Bandar Abbas. And from the industry perspective, we have been taking those initiatives. But in between COVID happened, and still there is a lot of information gap on the potential of Chabahar, and there are operational difficulties which Dr. Roy mentioned about. But from the Indian perspective, and major stakeholders like Mr. Kazani and Mr. Shinde, who are major player and major partners in implementing the project. So we've been working very closely with all the stakeholders, and the most important stakeholder is the freight forwarder community. So we need to incentivize them, and we need to work with them. Once they are on board, the things will start rolling out. Thank you.
So just by way of concluding remarks, I just wanted to mention that it's been a fruitful discussion. And I just wanted to pick up a few points. I think one, of course, is that we need to study the subject more in detail. And you mentioned about commissioning a study as to how Chabahar can be fully used. Then we come back to Iran route. And the issue, of course, is the fear that some of the companies might be subject to secondary sanctions. Now, we don't know, because at the moment this route is operational, so goods are passing. So, I don't think there is any fear from that point of view. But that could be one consideration one is think about. My own take on that is that perhaps we should think about special vehicles for each of these services, because if it's special vehicles, in that case they're basically government owned, and if those attract secondary sanctions, the larger number of private companies, they would not really be affected by that very much. That's my take, for whatever it's worth. The other thing, of course, is that it was mentioned, we talked about US $1 billion as to why it has not been fully used or not been used. So we need to study as to why, what is the problem with that. Now, I actually think that, after the COVID experience that we've all had, a lot of trade and service and investment have actually moved online. Actually, if you see most of the floor space, commercial floor space, they actually now going a begging, because a lot of people can work from home. So that is one way in which the issue of physical connectivity, that issue is overcome in a post-COVID phase, and that applies very much to Central Asia. Now, one useful conclusion that one can draw from this discussion is that this particular route, the Iran route, actually can be used for petroleum, and as well as for LNG. So that's something that one can explore, and there are many other possibilities that one can think of really from that point of view. Now, track gap and all that is talked about, obviously we've discussed that. The other possibility is now that we find that the EU and the other countries are interested, I think the Trans-Caspian, that axis certainly would be, I think, quite possible. Now, some other points actually I just wanted to make to just sum up. One is that, when we talk about trade figures, we're basically talking trade in goods. But if you look at the figures in services and investment, I think that's a completely different story. And that's something that we can work on with a very clear sort of idea as to with targets as to how we should go about it. But there's a huge scope for that, frankly, in all the services, whether education or health or God knows what. Everything we can pick up from that point of view. The point actually again is that if you look at the Delhi Declaration, in a way it has a much broader focus. And the broader focus actually is not so much of course we need oil and LNG, no doubt. But it is, the larger spectrum as to how India can engage commercially and, in a kind of a government-to-government engagement for the wider spectrum socio-economic progress. That's why I talk about high impact community projects, for example. Or we don't talk about that. I don't know why this is not so much the focus. We all know that because of global warming and a whole lot of other things, that the focus is shifting on energy base. So Central Asia has tremendous scope in terms of renewable energies, solar, for example, wind. And that can in some way even take care of the energy grid problem, because Central Asia doesn't really have yet fully operational, as it used with Soviet times, a pan-Central Asia energy grid. But for example, I can just give one example. Our army, for example, in the hill areas, they actually have wind-operated small micro power generating sort of arrangement, just enough to light up a village, for example. So there are a whole lot of these kind of things that we can pick up. And we talk about digitalization. So G20, our presidency actually focused on digitalization. So a whole lot of these areas, there's a huge amount of opportunity in terms of commercial investment. And that is where, in terms of the pervasiveness of our presence, our influence, our perception, I think that is the way to go, which is what our leaders actually have decided. And lastly, I'll just say one more point, and that is that, they also mentioned about setting up a center or secretariat for India Central Asia summit mechanism. I think we should set it up very quickly, because in one way that would be the task, perhaps, of setting up a roadmap for developing our relations with Central Asia in all these areas. So roadmaps mean what? They're very specific targets, very specific timelines. We can work on that. And as I mentioned, the geopolitical context is changing, I think the scope is quite considerable. And I think that perhaps that old way of thinking, about this kind of a focus on one or two specific issues, I think that perhaps is the time to really shift our focus, like we are talking about New India and New Central Asia. Thank you very much. So with that, I finish. And
thank you so much, sir.